and welcome to today's Free Training Thursday. I have Sam Saab, founder and EVP of Product from ResultsCRM here with me today. Sam is going to be taking us through using workflow for accounting jobs. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Sam.
Amanda, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being on the call. I love the number of registrations we have today. That's a pretty awesome number of you on the call today. So thank you for making the time to be here. So what we're going to be doing today is I'm going to be doing a mix of slides to organize how we're going to approach this presentation and training, and then we will go through the actual screens to show you how it's done. So first, let me switch slides on you. We're going to close this slide out, and we're going to go to this presentation. All right, Amanda, please confirm that you're able to see my screen, and it just changed to a results logo on that screen.
Confirmed.
Awesome. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. There's going to be 4 stages to this, right? So we're talking about workflow, and so effectively another way of doing it, or another way of speaking of it, is that the fact that you have certain ways of getting work done within your organization. That's generally referred to as the workflow, and the steps you take and the processes you go through to get stuff done. And what we're going to do is we're going to break it down into results terminology, and then go in there and actually show you how those are set up. So when it comes to workflow, the first aspect of this, and there's going to be 4 total, is to define your processes. And effectively your processes, and I'll explain those in a minute, and we're going to go into showing you how to do them. I'll explain what processes are. And then next thing we're going to come out to speak about would be the converting the process into a set of activities. That's stage 2. Stage 3 would be assigning those activities as a trackable activities to different individuals within your organization with minimal or no data entry. That's part of the automation and creating efficiencies and minimizing the need for manual resources to get work done. And the final one is to manage your deliverables and avoid failures by staying on top of the deliverables as they need to get accomplished. So these are the 4 things we're going to be speaking of in different sections. But the first one we're going to deal with is defining processes. And then we'll go into the system and show you how this is done. So first, what is a process? A process is really a one or more step to accomplish a certain goal at a certain point that it needs to get accomplished. So I'll give some examples of those. Results supports 2 types of processes. We have what we call predictive processes, and we have unpredictable processes. So a predictive process is by definition something that the system can sense or detect on its own when it needs to be triggered. An example of that, you hire a new employee. So there are the specific steps that you would need to do to fill paperwork, to get forms filled, to review and check different things to be appropriate before the person can be brought on. Sometimes this is referred to as onboarding an employee. Another type of predictive process is when a prospect that you have been trying to send estimates and proposals to agrees to move forward in receiving your business. In that case, a prospect becoming a customer will be considered a predictive process, because whatever your onboarding process is for a new customer, it will need to be accomplished at that time. And because the system knows when a contact type is changed from one to the other, then it's going to be able to automatically on its own trigger the appropriate process that will be put in place for that specific activity. That's another example of predictive. By the way, there's sometimes granularity in that, right? So let's say you have a specific onboarding process to onboard a commercial account. That is maybe 12 steps, but maybe when you're in your business and, let's say you do tax preparation. So you have residential accounts, you have commercial accounts. For commercial accounts, it's maybe a 10 or 12 step process, because there's many forms and terms and agreements that you need to have them sign as part of the work that you'll do for them. But maybe if it's a residential and you're just going to do a 1040 or basic financial consulting and advice, then it might be only a 3-step or a 4-step process. We need to send them a thank you letter. We need to send them a gift basket. We need to call them within a week to make sure they're happy, and then call within another week with a survey, or send a survey within another week to make sure everything is okay, or just whatever they are, right? That's predictive processes. We're going to set up a few and see how results have you handle those. The unpredictable process would be things that you need to be prepared for as a company or an organization, but you just don't know when that request is going to come in. For example, a request for cancellation of a service, a request for a refund or a change to an invoice, a request or handling a complaint regarding a service received or not received well. Any of those things that you might have one or more steps to accomplish when they come in are referred to as unpredictable. The system, you still need to put them in the system so that you have a consistency across the organization, but you wouldn't know when the request comes in. So now that we defined these processes, let's go ahead and work in getting those in the system and show you how you work. So the next step here, so the first was explaining and defining. So the next one we're going to engage is the process management, and that's where we're going to go and demonstrate all these things. This is taking a process, breaking it down into its actual steps or activities, and then show you how the system handles it. And that's the heart of what we're going to be demonstrating today. So most of the time is going to be spent on this step. So let's get into the results, and the system I'm going to be using is Results 2018, which is the shipping version of that. If you are not using the 2018, when you look on the top of your screen, you'll have 18 as the numbers. If you're not, please touch base with support or your APC account manager and request your most recent software update. By the way, in the future, once you're on version 18 and moving in the future, you no longer need to wait on our our announcements or letting you know that there's a new release. The system will automatically report for you that there's a new release. We'll show you the release notes so you can decide whether this is worth your update or not, and then you can proceed to automatically update to the latest system. The announcement will come in at login time for anyone in the company that is set up as an administrator. All right. Let's get into the processes then. So when you go to the setup menu, this is where processes are set up and maintained. And we talked about 2 types, predictive and non-predictive, and we're going to show you 2 of those in the system, and then we're going to show you how they're handled within the system. So let's go to maintain processes first. From setup, maintain processes. And this is the maintenance of the screen for maintaining those processes. And you'll notice a process, let's go with a predictive one from the examples we gave before. A person became a new customer based on a contact type being changed from a prospect to a customer, or they just walked in and say, you had a great referral. We can't wait to start doing business with you. We want to become your customer. And so you create a new record and mark them as a customer. So that's the new customer process. And in this case, you'll put a short description on it, and you would list whatever number of steps there are in getting that done. So to read this here with you, we're basically saying we're going to basically make an outgoing call within 1 day of the trigger, or when this process activates. We're going to send a letter within 2 days, and we're going to have a meeting with them within 7 days, a follow-up meeting. By the way, in each of those, you can open those actual records and then put in more details if you want to. Welcome call, as an example, could be what this wording is up here. The other thing that you can do within the results system, you'll notice the word override throughout. We're basically saying, because you already specified the activity type to be triggered, we're going to go ahead and push that into the system, and we will use whatever you program the service call out to say or do based on your activity type setup, then it will automatically do that. But if you want to override any of that with anything specific to this process, then you can actually specify that. So let me give you a specific example here. So let's say the call out is not a big deal. Anyone that has triggered that, in other words, changed them from prospect to customer, will be responsible for that. So the regular user. Let's go to the letter. Let's say you only have one person within the organization, and that's Jessica, and Jessica is the only one that is responsible for correspondence because we take them seriously and we want to make sure that only one person creates them in a proper voice and messaging for the company. So in that case, what I've done is I've gone to the service letter and the letter activity, and I'm going to say Jessica is send a follow-up welcome letter for new customer. So here I'm enhancing a little bit what was already in the system just to show you some examples of how specific entities can be tasked. And the last one is a meeting, and says basically meeting to verify no regrets, or whatever it is that you really want to summarize with that, or everything is going okay, or whatever you want to put in there. All right, so now that we have an actual process in place for new customers, let me show you how you actually make that the responsibility of the system and you take the burden off your users. So you go to setup, you go to the contact type, and from managing the contact types themselves, you're going to come into a new regular customer, and we have those two types of accounts. We have major accounts and regular accounts. We're going to say regardless whether they're major or regular, they're still a new customer. And so we're going to go ahead, and you see this drop down here that says process to activate when this contact type is assigned or selected. And we're going to say new customer. We're going to hit save. We're going to go to the regular account and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to also say new customer. By the way, this is an example of granularity. Let's say you want for a regular account, this approach is sufficient. The new customer approach is sufficient, but maybe for a major account, you want to send them a gift basket. So what you do in that case, you will take the new customer process, leave it alone, and then you create another process that has 4 steps instead of just 3, and that 4th step would be send a gift basket. So there you would go to the major account and select the distinctly different process that will say new customer, a new major customer as an example of the new name for that process. So you would create a distinction there, and that's where you can put some granularity. All right, I think we have what we need to demonstrate what's going on. So we're going to now go and manage contacts. We're going to go to an example in which we have a prospect. So let's go and look for prospect records in here. So I'm going to look for prospects. I have this prospect, Jenny McKenzie. We're going to open up the record for her. We talked to her, we made a phone call, and she was happy with the idea of moving forward within that. We've had 4 previous activities with her. What we're going to do right now is we're going to go to her record and we're going to move her from the prospect to a regular account. So effectively, we just change the contact type, and when we hit save, the system behind the scenes goes and check, is there a certain process that we need to run now that we designated as a person that was not a customer, just became a customer? And the answer is yes. And so the system basically didn't bother you with anything. It wasn't your user as a it wasn't a burden for you as a user. It took care of it. You're just acknowledging that you saw that happened. And now if you scroll down to the activities, there used to be 4. There should be now a total of 7. If you remember, that process had 3 steps to it, and they are inserted here. So the main thing to note then is that the fact that the system was able to take care of the responsibility of putting things out there and schedule them. Now notice the rules are, if you trigger a process, in this case I'm logged in as Mary, if I trigger a process, anything that is not assigned to a specific person, I own. It's on my plate. So you'll notice then I have a outgoing call to make, that's ID 723, on the 14th. Today is the 13th of September, so that would be within 1 day. That's on my plate. Remember, the letter was going to be sent by Jessica, so this was assigned to Jessica automatically, and then within 7 days, within 3 days, we have Mary doing the, no, it is 7 days, on the 20th, right here, ID 725, then Mary is going to have a meeting with them. And you'll notice the meeting, the description of that came in exactly the way it was listed in the setup itself, that this is going to be the information up here for the meeting. If we move that to the top, this is meeting to verify no regrets. That's going to be on the 20th. The letter is going to be sent out by Jessica, send a follow-up welcome letter assigned to Jessica, and then the meeting, the outgoing call here is a welcome call, is going to be assigned to Mary. So the exception was Jessica, and the 3 activities were pushed into the system and scheduled in the system. So that's predictive, and it has been handled by the system automatically. Let's go to a non-predictive process. You're dealing with a client, so I'm going to reset and refresh. Actually, let's do it this way. We're going to refresh that. We're going to open up any record. We're going to go to Edward Blackwell. Edward Blackwell just called, and he wanted support. So if we go to activities, there's one over there, so from the past. So here's how we handle a unpredictable process. We go to the action menu. You see the step up here that says Activator Process? We didn't know when that phone call is going to come in. But now that it's in, you click on Activator Process and you have a drop down. And these are the different things that you can handle. Some are predictive, some are non-predictive. Customer care, the request for support wasn't predictive, but now it came through. So I can highlight that option, click OK. When the system acknowledges that this was processed, you're going to see 2 steps that were handled or pushed into the system automatically. One of them is to send an email regarding the support ticket that came in or the support request or question that came in. And one of them is a survey to be handled later on to assure and confirm that everything was okay. So that's unpredictable. Actually, I'll tell you what, Amanda, please keep an eye on any questions that might come up. So please, for those of you using GoToWebinar or the control panel, you typically minimize it when you're not engaging it. But if you have any questions, please submit them within that questions area, and Amanda and I will keep an eye on those and answer your questions. So that's setting up a process. I'm sorry, go ahead, Amanda.
Oh, I just said absolutely. I'm looking out for those.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. That was setting up designing the process, converting the process into a set of activities, a series of 1 or more steps, and assigning them to the process, and then triggering the process either automatically or from an unpredictable perspective. We click on the drop-down selected for the system to do to trigger the process itself. The next one is to actually assign the trackable activities without data entry. So the idea here is similar to what we just did with the customer care, is that when you have a series of activities that you typically do, you are able to put them in the system to minimize the need for a person to manually accomplish those. So let's give you some examples of that. Let's say you deal with project management. So on a project, and let's say you're working on this project, there's a certain stage within that project that you need to go ahead and trigger a certain activity, certain series of activities that need to be accomplished at that level. So, or it could be based on a status, anything within the project itself. So the idea there is that, let's say this project went from a final to completed. And when you complete projects, what you do is you check with accounting to make sure everything is billed. You confirm that all the payments were received. You confirm that all the documents were attached to it. All the paperwork is completed, and then you archive the project itself. Let's say that's the process that you have to do. And at that point, what you do is you mark it as completed, and you exclude it from the list of active projects. That's the 2 steps you'll do when everything goes to completion. But like I gave as an example here, there were 3 separate steps that I wanted to accomplish to make sure that when we get to that stage, that everything is ready to be shut down and archived. So one way for me to handle that is to go to the Activities tab in there and add for myself and schedule for myself a specific activity that says, go ahead and check accounting. That would be something under business activities, and I would need to have a meeting with accounting and confirm that everything is done. That would be one way for me to accomplish that. And then the other one, we said, make sure that all the payments are received and then all the documents are there, right? So 3 steps. So I could manually add them, or since we do those on a regular basis as part of the completion, let's do this together in a different way. Let's actually exit from here. We're going to go to the setup. We're going to go to the maintain processes. We're going to create a brand new process from scratch together. So we're going to go and click here. We click on the add menu. And in this case, we're going to refer to this as a project completion process. Okay, sorry for the typos. You can put whatever description you have in here as needed. By the way, just to familiarize you with this, you also have a more detailed notes up here. Sometimes you do work that's part of a certification process for your type of firm or type of CPA, and so a specific process is basically unique and specific to accomplishing that kind of a requirement within your industry. And so this might be something you would cut and paste from your certification book regarding what kind of a process this supports. And sometimes there's different codes for them, so you can put that code at the end of it and then include the code in the description. Cut and paste that from the documents you're working with. That's why we give you the notes. The other tab that's available to you other than where you define it would be the activities history. You can go in here after the use of that. You're going to figure out and see every place where that process has been used. So it's a very effective way to review the various places where it has been used, and this will all automatically be listed for you under activities history. So let's get in there and do a process details. So we decided we're going to do 3 steps on this, and we're going to keep them all simple. So the first thing you want to do is your step numbers is up to you, but my recommendation is to put them as a multiple of 10 or 100. The idea there is you'll be able to then, if you want to expand your process, you can insert additional activities between other 2 existing steps without having to renumber everything. So this is up to you how you want to do the numbering system. So let's assume first that we're going to do, this is under business activities. And by the way, you can do it this way too. You go here to the grouped area, you go to the business activities, and you are going to say, we're going to meet. Okay, meet with accounting and confirm all invoicing has been completed. Okay, so we'll do that as a step, but let's consider this not specialized. And then we will do another step. So I'm going to add another one, and this would be step 20 in this case. And let's basically this time be a little bit more creative, maybe make a phone call, call accounting. Why walk down the hall when you don't have to, right? Call accounting and verify payments on all invoices. Now we're going to give them some time to do the invoicing before the payments. So maybe on this one, we will basically say within 3 days from the initial activity. And that would be fine. And the last one would be to review the documentation. So we'll do one more activity. In this case, it would be step 30. And we are going to have a meeting this time, and we're going to do a meeting with project folks. Let's do this within 7 days, and we will do this. So meet with team lead and verify all docs are attached before archive. Okay. Right, so we basically defined all the details. By the way, also one of the main advantages of processes is that in a way you're taking something that's policy for the company and documenting it within a place where other people can review it. And then if you change your mind and you want to add things to it, you are able to add steps between those 2 because there's a numbering system that gives you that flexibility, and there's always documentation of how it's done. So let's exit from here. And let's go back to the project that we were dealing with as an example. And so what we're saying up here is that we are at a certain stage, and we're going to go to this project, and we're going to put it, it's completed. And we're going to hit save. At this point, I'm going to need to, instead of manually adding those 3 activities, I'm going to go to my Activator Process. And if we click on the drop-down, we have something called Project Completing Process, right? We just spend the time building it together. And when you click OK, what are we expecting? How many activities should come in here? Everyone that says 3, congratulate yourself on the right answer. So effectively, then you have those coming in. I did not specifically override any of them to a different person. So I'm user Mary. I get assigned all 3 activities because I'm the regular user and there were not specialized activities. But also, I did not do any data entry either. Every single detail of what I need to do under each of those activities is already documented here. I'm already also can tell what's going to need to be done today or right away because we had left it at 0. We're also going to be doing this within 3 business days and this within 7 days. By the way, when you're looking at those activities, if you ever wondered what the process tab is about, when the process card, most of the time it's going to be empty if you're still not using processes. But when you start using processes, you're actually going to be, we're going to go in there and we're going to define or remind you what that process looks like directly from here. And you'll be able to see the one you're on is this step right there. It's the first step out of 3. So it's a great way for you to be reminded of that process without having to back out of this screen and go somewhere else. Because remember, there could be other activities that have nothing to do with the process also engaged here. So a process kind of identifies itself as part of a process and puts itself as part of a larger list. Okay, so I'm going to do one more other example. I want to make sure you have that. We might, let's see where we are. We're down to a few minutes. So we don't have enough time to set up a full one like that. But I do want to show you something called a milestone trigger or a continuation from, effectively sometimes referred to as chained activities. You're chaining one activity, series of activities to another series of activities. And you have the system trigger the next set of steps before you're able to complete the work. So let me show you what that means and what we're talking about. Let's go and take that actually 3-step process and make it a little bit more complicated. All right, here's what we're talking about. So we fully understand what this is. And let's basically say, you know, we put ourselves a responsibility to call within 3 days accounting and verify that the payments came in. What if the payments did not come in? What if I have rescheduled that a number of times? What if my review of the documents on the next set of stages is only going to need to be accomplished when this step is completed? Okay, in that case, what you're referring to is you're turning a certain step in there as a process. Let me give you a more specific example. I'm going to use this to program it and show you what that is done, what it looks like. But let me give you a more real example in your accounting firms. Let's say you do tax preparation. It's simple, right? You have your initial meeting. You tell them what documentation you need. You request of them to bring the documentation by a certain date based on the filing deadline, and then you get that and you assign it to a person that will go through it and create the forms, and then you file the forms electronically, right? So whatever they are, 4 or 5. Now, in my mind, within that process, it all seems straightforward. But what if that a person did not bring you the shoebox like they were supposed to on a certain date for you to meet your deadlines? Everything else needs to be rescheduled beyond that point. So instead of putting them all in one big process as one process with all these steps, what you can do is you can assume that the receipt of the box of receipts is your milestone, that without it, until that step is actually completed, only then would you schedule the rest of the work, giving your staff 7 days to go through the materials and another 3 days to fill the form or complete the forms electronically. So the idea then is that you have a separation from a one long process to 2 processes with a dependency in the middle, and that dependency you would wait on it until it's completed, and you will allow the completion of that to trigger the rest of the series of steps. Okay, so here's how this is done. This is going to be the one that's a milestone. So how does that really happen? Effectively, what you do is you would go to your setup and the activities, and under the activity type design, you can make a certain activity type require or be part of a process to activate when the activity is flagged as completed. So basically, instead of this being a regular phone call, let's make a copy of it. And we're going to basically refer to this as a call to complete payments, or anything else that you feel that might need to be done at that. But we're going to use that as the example. So there, because you want it to be a trigger, what you're going to come and do is you're going to be using that as a milestone, and then you're going to be using this piece up here to trigger the second stage or the second phase of the project completion, right? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go back to this process, and we're going to split this process into 2 steps. So we're going to refer to this as part 1, And here you'll explain until payments are received. Okay. And so what we do at this point then is we're going to take this regular innocent call that had this specific responsibility, and we're going to change that to a different type of a phone call that's specific to the payment tracking. So this would be, let's see, this would be, sorry, the second one. All right, so we're going to be this one that's a call to complete the payment. And then basically we hit a save on that one. Now this meeting is no longer part of this activity. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete it from here, and we're going to set it up as part of a part 2. Right, so we took a 3-step process and we built basically 2 processes. I'm going to make a copy of that. This becomes part 2. And this is after payment is received. After payments are received, and what we do up here is we simply add to that the meeting that we wanted. So there to be a step 10, we're going to go to a meeting, and this is the meeting we're going to have. So meet with the team lead to verify the archive. It's going to be 7 days from whenever that final milestone is going to be accomplished. Okay, let's summarize. I know I'm going quickly because we're short on time, but I want to make this sure this is clear and valuable. So let me summarize what we're dealing with up here. We're going to resort the processes. We have a process. Instead of a 3-step process, we decided to depend on this phone call to confirm the payments are there, and only when that is checked as completed, we will trigger this process to complete automatically, to do whatever should be done, which is verifying the documents and closing out the rest of the process upon automatic triggering of that second phase of the process. So now the only one other thing that we still need to do is we're going to go to this phone call that deals with the payments, and we're going to tell it that it's special. It's special because it's going to trigger part 2 of the process. Are we okay? Summary. We have a part 1 that does 2 out of the 3 steps. It waits until this phone call that deals with the payment is handled, and this might be rescheduled 2 or 3 times whenever it's finally completed on that date. Out of that date in which it's marked as completed, 7 days out, we will have the remaining process automatically trigger without human intervention. All right, I'll tell you what, we're a few minutes over, but obviously you would want to see that this is working, right? So let's go ahead and engage it real quick. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to Mike Ballack. We haven't worked with Mike in a while, so we're going to go to his activities, only one activity in there. So what we're going to do for Mike is we're going to say, hey, Mike, you had an unpredictable process for us. Oh, I'm sorry. We're doing this from a project. Forgive me. Let's go back to projects. And we will go to projects. We're going to click on a project, and we're going to go to, let's go to Sally's. So under for Sally's project, she's at the completed stage. We're going to go to the activities, and we're going to trigger the first process, the first part 1 of the process. So there's all of these here, and we're going to go ahead and activate a process. And in this case, that process is part 1. That's all we're going to trigger at this point. And there are 2 steps that are going to be added in there. So the completion for part 1 is triggered. So there they are, the meeting and the call. So we're going to go in, we're going to click on that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to basically say this, meet with the accounting firm to confirm that the invoices are sent. Let's basically say, yeah, that went well. Let's go ahead and mark that as completed. So completed and save. Okay, nothing triggered of that because that was still step 1. Let's go to step 2. It was done on 9/16. Let's say that's the day today. What the example here is the fact that we don't know when it's going to get completed, so maybe it got moved into September 25. And that's where we're going to engage it on September 25. So it's way out there. It got rescheduled again. Now it's going to be October 15. So let's move it out to October 15. And what we're going to do right now is basically say, okay, on October 15, let's pretend it's that date. Whoops, sorry, I meant to do an end. The start date would be on 10/15. So on that day, it's not going to be 20 days. It's going to be just 1 and 1 hour. Okay, so on that date, on 10/15, that's actually when we're going to mark this as completed. Remember, the person doing this has no idea that there was another phase of this. So as soon as I mark this as completed and hit save, what the system is going to do behind the scenes is going to be triggering the rest of the process for us. And now if we actually refresh, okay, and we go to the activities, there should be one that is scheduled for, assuming it works properly, call to complete. Actually, it did not. All right, so see what we missed up here, or what I missed for you up here. So that was triggered as completed. Okay. So this is version 18. Sorry about that, but version 18 has a slight bug. When you do that from the previous screen, it doesn't work properly. So I'll report that and get that resolved on the previous screen. But the bottom line is that when I had the full screen open, I went in here and marked that as completed. The user didn't have to worry about anything. The system on its own says, you completed that activity, good for you. 7 days out from 10/15, when you actually completed the activity, there's going to be another activity that's going to be set up. And by the way, from a system perspective, we track them as relating to each other. That's going to be your follow-up activity. So when we come out of here and we press the refresh button, you're going to see that that activity has actually been scheduled 7 days out from the 10/15 date. And let's see where that is. 734, 733. Okay, there is something not working correctly with the version 18 up here. So the actual follow-up to meet for the documents has been scheduled, but the number of days that's being calculated from the completion date is not being calculated correctly. So I do apologize for that. It is actually doing it from today's date as 7 days out instead of the actual activity of the 10/15. So the testing did not test with the future date of completing activity. They assumed it was from today. All right, so sorry for the final piece not actually showing through exactly the way I would expect it to demonstrate it for you. But the bottom line there is the fact that the remaining trigger, or the splitting out of the processes, allowed you to do the separate activities, and we would look at the date trigger for making sure the math is done right from the actual scheduled date, not from the trigger date. All right, the final item that I wanted to show was the completion of the managing the activities and making sure that the monitoring the assignments and manage deliverables to avoid failures. These are done by having individuals look at their to-do list, to-do board, and make sure that whatever is on their plate assigned, whether it was assigned through a process or not, will be already on that board. The other thing to look for is on the home page, you can, for you or other individuals within the firm, you can have the system look for pending activities, or you can even look for activities that are more than 3 days past due, or more than 2 days past due, or 7 days past due, whatever the trigger is that's important. And you do that by using the searches for what's called dynamic date search. The system always knows what today's date is. And when you're doing a math on today's date and you're having the system say anything that is more than 3 days past due, it will basically does the math on that number and identify for you all the activities that are still pending that are, in this case, 1 day past due. You can move that on your plate for today and then remove that from the failure list. But the home page is going to allow you to identify those records and then see them in the system as outstanding records. All right, sorry for running over. Thank you very much for your time today. And this video will be available on the webinar page within 24 hours. Typically, they need to convert it and upload it there. Thank you very much for your time. Amanda, back to you.
Thank you so much, Sam. As a reminder to everyone, this webinar will be available on our website at abacusnext.com/blog, and also available in your inbox to all who signed up. Thank you and have a great rest of your week.